In this video, I want to go some of the best features for Direct Modeler Toolkit in Houdini, which is add-on for Houdini, which offers more of the classic way for us to work with our models, and offers more of the interaction with the viewport without using as much of our node network. But the code is still there, you can still use it, and it's kind of offers the best of both worlds. More classic way to model our objects and still have a procedural network that we can always change it. So in short, I think it's a very nice add-on. It offers tons of possibilities, and I think if you're modeling in Houdini, and if your Houdini is your main modeling software that you do, I think this add-on is basically a must-have. So at the very most basic level for the modeler, once you have installed it, which is pretty simple, go inside, you're gonna get this tool, basically a tool tab. It's basically a shelf, it's called modeler, and then just to activate it, just press on this modeler or go to edit tool, and then just assign a hotkey for the view scener hotkey for it to activate it. So it's basically a special state in which it overrides all the hotkeys in a viewport for Houdini. So you can see you can see that it's a modeler toolkit. It's basically changed the mouse cursor. See, now it's outside, I'm outside it, and now I'm in modeler toolkit. So in modeler toolkit, thing is that you just press on spacebar and you can see all of these tools are at your disposal, and you can add any hotkeys to them and basically work with them more of a classical way inside Houdini for creating models. And for the hotkey, you just press on hotkey editor, and it's gonna bring up this one. You can basically assign any hotkeys that you want for all of these tools and just model your way, more classical way, I guess. So that's that, and I will be offering timestamps because I did record many parts of this video before I made actually this part the introduction to it, so don't be confused if I kind of repeat some of the things. But I think the information in it's still very valuable if you just want to see what it does and what possibilities is there with this toolkit. So yeah, so let's take a look at some of the tools. And before we actually take a look at these functionalities, I want to say that it has a very nice modeling PDF. It basically goes through all the tools, and we're gonna go through some of them, but you can see there's a lot more of them, and I think it's very nicely put out PDF that basically gonna talk about everything. So in no way in this video I'm gonna show everything that has this. I just played around with it, and these are some of my takeaways from this tool, and hope you enjoy it. Many of the nodes that come with this modeler toolkit is basically their versions of the default tools that Houdini has. So let's say there's a hard boolean for the modeler, and there's a, for this example I did is basically created the boolean tool, which is basically default Houdini tool, and the hard boolean tool which just comes with the modeler. So you can see the UI is different, and it's a little bit more of a streamlined experience. So you can change the angle, you can see the beveling, and there's a couple options that's not so easy to set up inside this boolean, and it's very easy in here, and vice versa. So you can see in boolean you can create AB seams. Basically, for me to create the same result as with this one, they did a little bit more setup. So for in this hard boolean, you can see it's basically, even though we cut it out from the same shape, from the same box, you can see in here, you can just bevel it like that with this cutter bevel option. For me to get the same result with this boolean, I have to bevel I have to bevel the boolean geometry to get this kind of shape inside here, and then I have to bevel it with the AB seams from the boolean that I just created. So it takes a little bit longer for it to get the same result, and it is really more of a streamlined experience. And you can also skip consistently between the radial menus. So now I'm in a modeler context and I press F4. For me it's a boolean tool which I can select, and when I'm also at this modeler toolkit, for me F4 is picking the polygon modeling radial menu, and bottom of it there's a boolean option for it. So I have created basically some kind of consistently between the hotkeys, so even if I'm at the modeler or outside the modeler, my hotkeys are very similar to it and I don't have to press a different key. Another thing that you may have noticed that in this modular radial menu there's actually more options than just, there's actually some of these are, you see that it's basically mirrors them, union, because these with the shadow, icon with the shadow, it actually soft boolean nodes. So these are basically the kind of, if you ever use the mesh fusion in Modo, it's basically creating a very nice rounded edges whenever we subtract or do any operation, boolean operation. So it's best used with the subdivided mesh. So what I have there is subdivided mesh, just with the many curves. Let's create some primitives. So for this, there's a very nice primitive, for modular primitive menu. And let's create a tube like that, and maybe something like this. It does create basically every primitive that you create. Basically, it's in a new geometry node. So if you have someone like me, I have always kind of used to creating geometry inside one network. So it is kind of a different approach, I guess. So it's every connected part is basically on its own part, but in its own node. But you can see when we, let's say, select all of this, and let's go or boolean menu, and let's say we want to subtract it. You can see it's basically automatically going to go on obj, and then we can select what we want to subtract from, and then select this tube, wait a bit, and you can see we have now cut it out, and you can see it's basically going to import this geometry. You can see it's basically our node, our tube node is now gone from the obj. It basically got imported inside our network that we just selected first from, actually the second one. So basically we imported this subdivided mesh as a second input inside our tube primitive. You can see what it does, it creates very nice smooth edges. Now let's play around with these options. You can see there's actually intersect also, just like your typical boolean options, union, and with union you can change and get very nice kind of a merging of the two objects like that. So it is basically just like with the mesh fusion inside Modo, if you have used Modo. And what's cool about this, you can also use a contour. So this is basically going to create kind of a creasing around your object like that on both sides. So if you ever need a creasing, just create some sort of object and boolean it very nicely. You can see it's basically going to automatically subdivide it. Let's change subdivision maybe to 2, how it looks. See, it still works pretty well. Even with the, you can see that even though our mesh is not very subdivided, you can see that our boolean still works whenever there needs to be a lot of geometry. You can see it still works, and even normal look doesn't look too bad. So obviously it's best to work with a good amount of polygons for it, for the best results. Next, of course, we could also then we can just poly reduce it and maybe bake it out, but if you're okay with this kind of a poly amount, very clean looking mesh, that's definitely an option. Another cool thing that we have is actually kitbash libraries that we can save. So let's say we use a lot of some certain object that we use for boolean, we can basically just save it and use it whenever we want, and also insert mesh parts. So let's just take a look at it. First of all, let's set it up for us to have this pane. Let's go inside our menu, press spacebar, and in the key editor, basically going to be just write in the kitbash. There's going to be kitbash menu, assign a key to it. And now, by pressing this key, you can see we have this radial menu, and this kitbash is basically going to create the kitbash menu. So I'm gonna close it down and press it again, and you can see it's basically going to act where to create it. Here, here, or here. So since we have Python shell, let's make it up in here. I'm gonna say open up in here, and to make sure that we don't have to every time open it up, just go inside here and save current desktop. So this is going to basically create this desktop every time that we open up, and we don't have to manually create this pane all over again, because our still parameters are still here and we can switch between them. So let's say we want to save this to our library. So just select the object, go inside this kitbash py menu and then just a new item. You can see as long as we have selected these quad primitives, you can see it's gonna create a quad primitive inside here. So now let's delete it and double click on it. You can see we have now saved it and we can use it whenever we want. And of course we can also import any of these already presets, which are basically already subdivision ready geometry models. So that's that. But what's more interesting is actually this insert mesh. So I just insert maybe this kind of a barrel. So we have this very nice subdivided mesh. Let's say I want to insert some of these details inside. So one thing to know that it is the best to know how many. So let's just import this button and let's take a look at it. So you can see that if you select the edges of it, that's going to be connected to. There's 8 edges of it. So for us to make sure that we have good connection, which is not actually that important, but for us, for the best connection, we need also 8 edges. So what I'm going to do is select 4 primitives. That's going to create 4 edges for our insert mesh. So to insert mesh, all I have to do is hold Alt and double click on any of these details. So double click on it like that. So one thing you will notice that we are getting these weird normals. To fix them, what we can do is actually put down a normal before the tube into this barrel. So you can see we don't have any normal primitive, so any normal attribute. Just add normal like that. So make sure in normal there's a good smoothing for it. And now once you have inserted, you can see any of these normals looks very nice. Any that this connected to, you can see before and after normals. What's cool about this, you can individually subdivide this mesh. So make sure you add this. You can see all of the options for it. So we can with the left mouse button scale it down and up. Then we can shift. We can scale it kind of how big it is. Like that. We can control shift, kind of translate it in and out. So let's make it something like this. And what's cool about this, with the wheel we can actually control the subdivision for it. You can see we can subdivide as much as you want. Our normals are still very nice. You can see it subdivides only this part of it that we just inserted. So you can see it creates a very nice normals, a very nice looking mesh with the low poly density in here, but where it matters there's going to be high poly count. So and shift and wheel to expand smooth normals. So this is basically the inner parts of this what we just smoothed out. You can see I'm gonna hold down shift and scroll it. You can see I can smooth out all of this, and you can see it's basically invisible. So make sure that you do not smooth everything. What I like to do is basically smooth right at the end of the shape, and that's it. So just something like this, and that's it. So let's try it out with another one. So one thing to be mindful of, let's say I want to add another insert shape, maybe like in here. I just add this one. You can see when it's right next to it, it's going to mess around with these normals. So make sure you don't create another insert mesh right next to it. So let's insert this one maybe in here, like that. You can see we are getting very nice result without any weird normal intersect. So for this you probably want to maybe insert very narrow polygon strip inside here, and then add it in here if you want it to be closer to each other. So it's kind of, you have to pre-plan it, kind of like so. I just move this around like that. You get like a barrel. So that's very cool. Another thing that you can easily select and change if you don't like this insert, you can basically make sure you have selected the node, insert no mesh node that you want to change. Then with shift double click on any of these meshes, you can basically just insert another mesh on it, like that. For us to update item that already in this library, so let's say we have this view primitive, and let's say you want to update it to this new look. So let's say I want to update to this one. So make sure you have selected it in here, and then once you have selected this one here, go to your kitbash menu and just say to the replace item, and that's it. So you can see that now it's updated. double click, you see it's gonna copy this one, but you can see that the thumbnail is not updated. So for thumbnail to be updated, just make sure you have selected this one, go back in here and press auto icon like that. You can see now it's changed to this one. So basically, from what I understand, only difference between auto and icon update is that, let's say, we select this one and we go way out here, and then just select an update icon. You can see it's gonna basically select it from where you are looking at. But with auto icon, it's basically going to use the home, so with spacebar and home, spacebar and H key, which is home selection, which is gonna frame everything that's inside this viewport. So spacebar and H is actually the default one. It's not the modeler, but the default Houdini hotkey for the home selection. So that's that. And also for the insert mesh, so let's create a quick insert mesh brush. Let's delete this one. Now let's create a simple insert mesh object. So let's just do it with 8 sides. So let's delete these. Let's start with working with these. So one thing I do like is, so what let's do is kind of follow these kind of guidelines. So let's just select this edge and make a circle from it. So these are all basically the hotkeys for the modeler hotkey that you can add from the hotkey editor. So after that, let's just select all of these and let's just extrude, and let's just hold down so for shift and left mouse button for insert it. So basically I'm doing it this because I want to follow this topology, because I want it to subdivide nicely. So now let's just extrude it again like that. So and then let's preview it. Now let's just select these again, extrude it, shift, hold like that, and I just now extrude it again outwards like that. And let's just, for this, let's add some subdivision like that. Let's preview it. So let's just select maybe these. Let's just bevel them like that, preview it. So let's say this is going to be our insert mesh brush. So one thing to note, that before you create it as insert mesh brush, make sure that you have basically this kind of open ends like that. So this is basically where we're gonna connect them to, and then make sure you actually, so wherever you want to connect them has to be at a 0 like that. So let's just save it, let's just select it, and in kitbash, so make sure it's at insert mesh, then a new item like that. So now let's take it out. Let's put on a tube. So in options, let's make it something like this. And now since we created 8 sides, let's select this one and then double click Alt. We added it. You can see basically whenever this part is at 0, it's basically put it flush with the surface. So that part that you want to connect has to be flush with the Y axis at 0. And now let's subdivide it like that. Let's just put down a normal for our primitive like that. You see, getting very nice insert mesh with nice normals. So that's that. So I think this is very nice feature, because many of programs that previously I have worked with have this feature, and it's cool to have Houdini for it, and it's all still based on the nodes. You can still go back, and it's kind of like best of both worlds in my opinion. It's procedural, and also when you want it just to work with your mesh, it's very dependent on your hotkeys. It's in a viewport. It's more of a classic experience for the modeling. So very common thing that you will do, aligning edges. So in this flatten menu, it's basically this is what you would think. It's basically going to flatten it out on up, down. So basically the lowest point in here is here. So it's going to flatten out all the edges until here. And it's just a very nice way to flatten it out, flatten out any polygons or something like that. And it also works with polygon selection, flatten down like that. And also there's a couple of options that I haven't really seen in others. So by the edge, so once you have selected this, and by edge you can see it's going to flatten out everything that it basically comes along with this curve. So let's do it again, but now let's select this edge like that. So that's incredibly useful, and now to I think it's kind of like an average of it. It's gonna average out this selection. There's a bunch of the compass and edge direction, which is haven't really used it all that much, but it's there and you can play around with it. So just another huge thing for the direct modeling, that you do lots of basically just flatten out the edges or polygons or vertices. It also works with vertices. So that's another huge thing for this toolkit. Another thing that's great about is the array tool. So what I have here is just two objects, and let's say I want this box to be copied on this plane. All I really have to do is go into compass and select the plane that I want to align my array to. And once I have done that, all I have to do is put down an array node. You can see our array is now following the selection. One of the tools that stood out for me is the fixing of the overlaps. So it's here, you can see when you go in modeling, there's maybe sometimes you just miss something, maybe you don't fuse some of the points, and you get these very ugly overlaps of polygons, and by manually it would be really difficult to fix it up, so maybe you would have to delete some of this. But there's an actual option for it. So in a hotkey editor, it's basically fixed overlaps. For me it's O. By pressing it, you can see it's gonna automatically fix any overlap problems. One thing that I immediately start with looking at how can I change is the perspective view, left, bottom, and all of those. So in recent update they did add this radial menu for the perspectives, top, bottom, and all of that. But for me, I actually like them as a hotkeys. So there is a way for us to add actual tools to our custom tools to our modular scene, kind of like a instance. So what you have to do is pretty simple. So in my shelf, so you have to add that simple shelf item. So just press and plus and then add shelf, new shelf. And I have already made, so I'm gonna edit the shelf, and all you have to do is make sure that it's called modular.custom. The name is important and label can be whatever, and that's it. Once you have created, you can actually go here and new tool. And basically any tool that you create in here can be added as a hotkey inside here, and then it can be used as a hotkey in here that's gonna show up as a custom one. So this is basically all of my hotkeys in here is basically imported inside the modular instance like that. So a couple of things you have to do is, let's delete this one I just created. So all I have to do is create each one of these as a button for our perspective view and all of that. So how could I do it? Basically go inside here. In modeler there's a viewport type option. Go to the edit current, and that you can see every one of these options, top, bottom, right, has its own script. So just select all, copy it, close it down, and in my shelf, new tool, and then in the script, just paste inside here. What's cool about this, you can just take this and whatever you want to do, since you want all of these buttons, you have all we have to do is just change one thing in it. So in here, you just have to delete the top, and then just, let's say I want the perspective. You can see it's gonna automatically also fill in all of these. So back, right, top, and all of these. Let's say I want this to be a perspective view. Apply, and one important thing, we have to apply hotkey in here. So for the hotkeys, you have to go in hotkey, in scene viewer, make sure it's a scene viewer hotkey, edit, and let's say I add it to Control, Shift, and F5. Apply, accept, apply, make sure it's in here. So tool, you can name it, let's call it test. Apply, accept, and that's it. Now we have our test in our custom shelf. In modeler, just press on this button, reload, press and reload, and when I spacebar, you can see my test is here, and it has assigned the same hotkey that we just created inside our custom shelf. So now I'm just gonna test it out. So it's gonna be perspective, Control Shift F5. You can see it's went to the perspective view. So this is how we add our custom things in it. For our own custom tools, what you can do is create a new tool, And here we have to do a little bit of a script. So in help, actually it's very helpful. Basically what we have to do is write this code, and then in this, where this in quotations, my radial menu is the name of our radial menu. So what I have in here, I have my custom radial menu, and as I press on edit current, you can see name is my custom. I'm gonna just copy it, close it down, and then just write it down. So this is going to basically the same thing. Only thing we change is the what we import modular and modular that show radial menu like that, and then just write it down the name of your custom menu, apply, accept, and that's it. You can see now that I press it, we have our own custom menu. Of course, let's just add a hotkey for it. So in scene viewer, let's just test it out. Let's say I want for this to be Control Shift and F6. Apply, accept, apply. So you can see we are still in modular view, and I press on it. Control Shift. First of all, we have to reload it like that. You can see we have now imported our own custom radial menu. One thing you will notice that by default, when you press on this modular button, you go inside this modular state, you can see it's automatically going to select the lasso select. I actually don't like it. I actually like the box selection for the most part. You can see it basically selects automatically lasso. So this you can actually change this to the box selection by default. So in a installation, you can see it basically says modular pick style. You can change this to box, lasso, brush, laser. So I just copy box and let's change it. So let's go to the installation place in my Houdini installation place, the packages, and that's going to be this file that you just copied inside here. Open it up. You can see it's value lasso. Just delete it and paste it inside box. Save it, close it down, and once you have restarted Houdini, you can see when let's select the brush select and go inside this, you can see it's automatically going to select the box style. One thing I do like to do is actually create these hotkeys inside the modeler as close as possible to the actual Houdini hotkeys. So let's say one thing you can see how you are outside this modeler is this cursor. So you can see inside the modeler, you can see it says modeler, and you can see that mouse cursor is a little bit different, my mouse pointer. So that's one way you can easily tell that you're in modeler state. So let's say in my basic Houdini, I always have my select pretty much expand selection pretty much the same as in ZBrush, which is Control Shift X like that, and Control Shift S extract to expand and subtract selection. So what I want to do is actually create the same hotkeys for these. So in hotkey editor, go inside this, go inside modeler, press here in hotkey editor, and just write in selection. So it's going to probably be called expand or expand. It's basically, so it's not actually expand. Let's take a look. Maybe grow. That's it, grow selection. So just double press on it, Control Shift X. You can see selection. So grow and shrink in selection. Control Shift S. You can see some of these hotkeys are going to be already assigned to other keys, but that's okay because we're still going to make them all custom for ourselves. And that's it. So now once I'm inside modeler, you can see I have basically the same hotkeys as in Houdini. I grow it and shrink it in both contexts with the same hotkeys. Another tip that I would suggest you to do is actually assign the same hotkey as your activation modeler as your quitting hotkey. So since it overrides all of these hotkeys in viewport, you can basically assign the same hotkey for the quitting of this modeler. So with one button you can go inside it and exit it. So once you have set it up your hotkey in here, so for me it's F2. I'm gonna go in modeler, go to the hotkey editor, and then just in quit, or is it yeah, it's quit, and you see I have also F2 assigned to it. So since it's overridden, I can exit and enter the modular state with the same hotkey. So that's one tip for you to maybe don't have so many hotkeys.